Imagine yourself in a world before the constant hum of machines, before the reliable glow of electric lights. You step onto cobbled streets, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke, mingled with something far less pleasant. Life here is raw, demanding, a constant negotiation with nature and necessity, often in ways we can barely conceive today. To survive, people devised ingenious, sometimes unsettling ways to earn their bread. Forget your modern careers and conveniences. Back then you might be called to collect the city's refuse in the dead of night, or tasked with keeping the streets clear of rats. Perhaps you would stand by the bedsides of the dying to absorb their sins, or even steal from graves for the sake of medicine. These were not just strange occupations, they were the very fabric of daily life, keeping the ancient world turning. And as that ancient world turned, it also produced a colossal daily byproduct. Something that everyone contributed to, yet few wanted to acknowledge, let alone handle. We speak of human waste. Before the flush toilet, before complex sewer systems ferried our refuse away unseen, the cities and towns of yesteryear faced a monumental, malodorous challenge. Where did it all go? Imagine yourself in a sprawling city before the modern age. You navigate narrow, winding streets, cobblestones slick with recent rain and something far less appealing. The scent of industry, of wood smoke and tanneries, hangs heavy in the air, but beneath it all, an inescapable, pervasive odor weaves through every alleyway, every bustling market square. It is the smell of human habitation, unfiltered and raw. You see no public conveniences as you know them today, no discreet, ceramic facilities awaiting your need. Instead, you might spot a small, rickety structure at the rear of a tenement block, or a simple hole leading to an overflowing pit. You might even glimpse a servant emptying a chamber pot directly into the gutter, adding to the simmering stew of the street. This was the inescapable reality. Every single person, from the lowliest pauper to the wealthiest merchant, produced waste, day in and day out. In a world without the hidden plumbing that we take for granted, that waste piled up. It filled deep, brick-lined cesspits beneath homes and public buildings. It collected in rudimentary privies that offered little in the way of privacy or hygiene. It seeped into the ground, contaminating wells and spreading disease. The very air you breathed carried its unseen particles. Without intervention, these urban centers would quickly become uninhabitable, choked by their own refuse, breeding grounds for plague and pestilence. Here steps forth a figure you might never expect. A profession born of dire necessity and often cloaked in the darkest hours. You hear the creak of a heavy cart, the plodding hooves of a tired horse, long after the last tavern has shuttered its doors and most citizens are deep in slumber. This is the sound of the night soil man, or in older English, the gong firmer. His work was as vital as any baker or blacksmith, yet he operated in the shadows, his presence often endured rather than welcomed. You watch as he approaches. His clothes are old, coarse and stained, bearing the indelible marks of his trade. He carries a lantern, its flickering light casting dancing shadows on the grimy walls, illuminating the tools of his grim craft. A sturdy, long-handled scoop, thick leather buckets, and sometimes a protective mask or cloth pulled over his mouth and nose, offering scant defense against the overwhelming stench. His task is simple in concept, horrifying in execution. He is hired to descend into the murky depths of overflowing cesspits, or to clean out the brimming buckets and barrels of private dwellings. Imagine yourself in his place, stepping into the dim, fetid darkness of a privy vault. The air is thick, stifling, laden with methane and ammonia, potent enough to make your eyes water and your stomach churn. You can feel the viscous, warm muck clinging to your boots, hear the unsettling plop and splash as you begin to work. With practiced efficiency he begins to scoop. Each bucket is filled with the thick, sludgy accumulation of months, sometimes years, of human excrement. It is a slow, methodical process, performed in an environment hostile to human senses. The weight of each full bucket is considerable, and it must be hauled up, often by hand or winched from the depths of a particularly deep pit. You might see the sweat not just from exertion, but from the oppressive heat and the sheer unpleasantness of the task, beating on his brow even on a cool night. As each bucket emerges, its contents are carefully transferred to the waiting cart. These carts are specially constructed, often with tight-fitting lids to minimize spillage and contain the pervasive odor, though complete containment is an impossible dream. The smell, a distinct and unforgettable bouquet of the city's underbelly, travels with the cart. You might catch a whiff even from a distance, a stark reminder of the work being done. Why at night? The answer is twofold. First, the smell. To transport such a potent cargo through the crowded daytime streets would be an affront to every nose, potentially causing widespread discomfort and even outrage. Second, public perception. While essential, the night soil man's profession was seen as dirty, impure, and low status. Working under the cloak of darkness allowed him to perform his vital service with a degree of discretion, minimizing direct contact and social stigma with the wider populace. He was the unseen cleaner, the necessary evil. You might wonder about the value of such a man, relegated to the margins of society. Yet his worth was immeasurable. He was a guardian of public health, an unsung hero preventing the spread of diseases like cholera and dysentery that routinely swept through unhygienic populations. Without his nightly rounds, cities would have become epidemiological nightmares, their populations decimated by illnesses stemming directly from accumulated filth. But his utility did not end there. The night soil he collected was not simply discarded. Oh no. It possessed a powerful, often underestimated value. It was a potent fertilizer, rich in nitrogen and other nutrients essential for growing crops. So, once the night soil man had completed his collection in the city, his journey continued. He would often travel to the outlying fields, to the market gardens and farms that fed the very city he had just cleaned. You might observe him, perhaps in the pale light of dawn, emptying his malodorous cargo onto the land. Here the cycle completed. What was waste in the city became nourishment for the soil, fueling the growth of vegetables, grains, and fruits that would eventually return to the urban markets. This circular economy, driven by the night soil man, highlights an ingenious, if primitive, solution to a universal problem: how to sustain a large human population without modern technological aids. He was, in effect, a crucial link in the food chain, albeit one cloaked in ignominy. The dangers of his work extended beyond the simple disgust. Cesspits could be unstable, their brickwork crumbling, threatening collapse. The confined spaces were often oxygen depleted and filled with toxic gases, capable of overcoming a man in moments, rendering him unconscious or worse. Falls, injuries from sharp objects, and exposure to countless pathogens were constant occupational hazards. You would need a hardy constitution, an iron stomach, and a deep, perhaps desperate, need for coin to undertake such a profession. How much did he earn for this essential yet repulsive labor? It varied greatly by region and by the volume of his work. Some night soil men operated independently, charging a fee per pit or per barrel. Others were employed by the city or by specific institutions. While it was never a path to great wealth or social standing, the wages were often enough to support a family, a testament to the sheer demand for this service. For many, it was the only available livelihood, a grim choice in a world with limited options. You walk away from the scene, leaving the night soil man to his solitary, smelly toil. His work is a stark reminder of a time when the most basic aspects of life, now hidden behind walls and pipes, were raw, tangible, and unavoidable. You no longer think of the plumbing in your home as mere convenience, but as a monumental achievement, a silent liberation from the pervasive odors and diseases that once defined urban existence. The masters of muck, the stewards of the night soil, were not celebrated figures. Their names are largely forgotten by history, their faces obscured by the shadows of their nocturnal labor. Yet, without them, the vibrant, bustling cities of the pre-industrial world could not have existed in the way they did. They were the anonymous, essential gears in the machinery of ancient urban life, literally clearing the way for civilization to progress, one foul, heavy bucket at a time. They were the unsung heroes of hygiene, the quiet cultivators of the land, performing a service so fundamental, so utterly necessary, that its absence would have meant the collapse of urban society itself. Their story, though unpleasant to consider, is a powerful testament to human adaptability and the lengths people would go to survive, and to keep the world turning. You stand at the threshold of a small, dimly lit cottage, the air thick with the scent of beeswax candles and something else, something heavier, the smell of recent death. Inside, the hushed whispers of mourners barely stir the silence. You feel the palpable weight of sorrow and perhaps a deeper dread. A body lies still on a simple bed, shrouded, its face peaceful yet undeniably absent. But it is not the stillness of the deceased that truly holds the room in its grip. It is the fear of what may linger, what unconfessed burdens might cling to the departed soul, preventing its peaceful journey, or worse, casting a shadow over the family left behind. This is a world where belief in the direct consequences of sin is not a metaphor, but a stark reality. Unabsolved sins are not merely spiritual concepts. They are heavy chains anchoring the spirit, potentially condemning it to restless wandering or eternal torment. For families in remote villages, far from the consistent presence of a priest or minister, or for those whose loved ones died suddenly, without the last rites, a profound anxiety would settle. How could they ensure their kin's soul found peace? How could they lift this unseen, spiritual burden from their home? Then a figure appears at the doorway, gaunt and solitary, clad in worn, dark garments that seem to absorb what little light there is. You instinctively step back, a shiver running down your spine. This is the Sin Eater. Their presence is met with a mixture of reverence and revulsion, a strange alchemy of desperate hope and deep-seated fear. They are an outcast, a pariah, a necessary evil in the eyes of the community. Yet, in this moment of profound need, they are also a lifeline, an unholy minister performing a grim, ancient sacrament. You watch as the Sin Eater approaches the bedside. They carry no Bible, no chalice, only the simple tools of their trade. A small wooden trencher holds a piece of bread, often a coarse, dark loaf. Beside it, a wooden cup, perhaps a plain mug, filled with ale or beer. Sometimes a few small coins are placed upon the deceased's chest, a final payment for this most extraordinary of services. These items are carefully laid out, often directly on the body or on a cloth spread over it. The bread, the ale, the coins, they are not merely symbolic. They are, in the belief of the age, the vessels, the conduits. The Sin Eater kneels. Their eyes, though downcast, seem to hold the weight of many sorrows, many secrets. There is no fanfare, no spoken blessing, no grand pronouncements. The ritual is quiet, solemn, profoundly unsettling. You can almost feel the air in the room thicken, a tangible sense of something unseen being transferred, absorbed. Slowly, deliberately, the Sin Eater takes the bread and consumes it. Each bite is a swallow of unspoken transgressions, a mouthful of the deceased's earthly failings, their petty dishonesties, their hidden resentments, their forgotten cruelties. Then they lift the cup and drink the ale. This draught is believed to wash down the sins, to complete the transfer, to seal the pact. The coins are then taken as payment, both for the service and metaphorically as a further token of the deceased's debts being settled. As the Sin Eater finishes, a quiet sigh might escape the lips of the grieving family members. A flicker of relief, a loosening of the invisible bonds that had held them captive in their sorrow. The ritual is complete. The sins, those unseen specters, are now, by ancient belief, lifted from the departed soul and transferred to the living vessel of the Sin Eater. You observe the Sin Eater rise, a heavier step now, a slower movement. Their already somber demeanor seems to deepen, a new layer of invisible grime adhering to their spirit. They offer no words of comfort, no condolences. Their job is not to console but to absorb. With the ritual concluded, they turn and leave, often without a backward glance, their path cleared for them by the wary, silent mourners. The door closes behind them, shutting them back into the isolation that is their constant companion. This was the life of the sin-eater. To take upon oneself the spiritual detritus of the dying, to become a walking repository of others' moral failings. Imagine the profound isolation, the constant burden of knowing you carry not just your own transgressions, but a growing, accumulating weight of everyone else's. You are shunned, avoided. People would cross the street to avoid passing too close, fearing that merely being near a sin-eater might expose them to the spiritual contagion of absorbed sins. Children would be pulled away hushed. The sin-eater could rarely find comfort, fellowship, or a place of belonging within the community they served in such a vital, if horrifying, capacity. Their existence was a continuous penance, a living sacrifice. Why did such a deeply unsettling and profoundly lonely profession exist? It speaks volumes about the pervasive fear of eternal damnation, the limited access to formal religious solace in certain areas, and the enduring power of folk beliefs and superstitions in pre-industrial societies. In an era before modern medicine offered explanations for disease and death, when the mysteries of the afterlife loomed large and terrifying, rituals like sin-eating offered a concrete, albeit desperate, solution to an abstract, spiritual problem. It was a form of spiritual insurance, a last resort for families convinced that an unabsolved soul would haunt their lives or suffer endlessly. Consider the desperate love of a parent for a child or a spouse for their partner, who died too quickly for confession or too far from a priest. The idea that someone could literally eat their sins and thus free their soul must have been a powerful, if grim, comfort. It was a transaction of the most solemn kind, a spiritual outsourcing that allowed the living to find a measure of peace, even if that peace came at the terrible cost of another's spiritual burden. The practice of sin-eating was most prevalent in parts of rural England, Wales, and Scotland, and later found its way to isolated communities in the Appalachian Mountains of the United States, carried across the Atlantic by immigrants retaining old country customs. It flourished in places where ancient folk traditions held strong sway alongside, or sometimes in place of, formalized religious doctrine. It was a testament to a time when the boundaries between the sacred and the profane, the material and the spiritual, were far more fluid and permeable than we might perceive today. The sin-eater was not an ordained priest, and their ritual was never sanctioned by mainstream churches. In fact, it was often actively condemned as a pagan or superstitious practice. Yet, the enduring need for absolution, for a tangible way to release the soul from its perceived earthly attachments, ensured the sin-eater's grim profession continued for centuries. They filled a spiritual void, offering a folk remedy for a fear deeply embedded in the human psyche, the fear of an unclean death, of a soul trapped in purgatory or worse. Imagine the sin-eater at the end of their own life. Who would perform the ritual for them? Who would dare to consume the accumulated sins of an entire lifetime, a lifetime spent absorbing the moral failings of countless others? It is a question that hung heavy over their isolated existence, a final, unanswerable torment. Perhaps they believed their own suffering in life, their ostracism and burden, served as their own penance, a grim form of purification. As the industrial age dawned, bringing with it urbanization, greater access to formal religious institutions, and a gradual shift away from pervasive folk superstitions, the role of the sin-eater began to fade. The last recorded sin-eater in England is said to have died in 1906, though echoes of the practice or similar rituals persisted in isolated pockets for a while longer. The world was changing, and with it, the desperate spiritual landscape that had given rise to such a unique and troubling profession. Yet, the story of the sin-eater remains a powerful, stark reminder of the lengths to which people would go, the extraordinary roles they would embrace or endure, in a world grappling with the profound mysteries of life, death, and the unseen. It illustrates a deep human need for ritual, for a sense of control over the uncontrollable, and for the desperate hope of spiritual peace, even if that peace had to be purchased at an unimaginable price, borne by the most solitary and condemned among them. The Sin-Eater's strange existence highlights a fundamental aspect of human history, our constant search for meaning and resolution in the face of our deepest fears. It shows how even the most repellent tasks could be imbued with profound, albeit dark, purpose. And it sets the stage for other peculiar livelihoods, equally essential in their own way, born from the unique demands and beliefs of a pre-industrial world. The world you inhabit, before the roar of factories and the glow of electric lights, is one of deep shadows and even deeper needs. It is a world where knowledge, particularly knowledge of the human body, remains elusive, guarded by tradition and superstition. Yet, the relentless curiosity of early medicine demands answers, and those answers often lie just beneath the earth, in the quiet slumber of the recently departed. Imagine the chill of a winter's night, the gas lamps casting long, dancing shadows down narrow cobblestone streets. You are not a sin-eater, offering a morbid absolution. Your trade is far more pragmatic, yet no less steeped in the macabre. You are a midnight harvester, a resurrectionist, one of those who supply the insatiable hunger of anatomy schools with their most vital and most illicit resource. You feel the cold seep into your bones as you move through the silent churchyard, the fog thick and clinging. The air tastes of damp earth and the distant city soot. You are keenly aware of every rustle of leaves, every distant dog bark. Your eyes, accustomed to the gloom, scan for the freshly turned earth, the telltale mound that signifies a new arrival to this temporary resting place. Your livelihood, and indeed the progress of medical science, depends on your skill and your discretion. The demand for human cadavers in the 18th and 19th centuries was colossal, far outstripping any legal supply. Medical students, eager to understand the complex machinery of life and death, needed bodies to dissect. Surgeons, striving to improve their craft, required hands-on experience that only a fresh corpse could provide. But the law, slow to adapt, severely restricted access. Only the bodies of executed criminals, a paltry handful each year, were legally available for dissection. This created a profound, macabre vacuum. And into that vacuum stepped you, the grave robber. Your work is precise and clandestine. You carry not a shovel, but a specially designed, short spade, easy to conceal and less likely to hit the coffin below ground with a telltale thud. You also have a sack, perhaps a crowbar, and certainly a lantern, its light carefully shielded. You work in teams, sometimes of 2, sometimes of 3 or 4, each with a specific role, each attuned to the movements and sounds of the night. You select your target carefully, often scouting the cemetery days in advance. A pauper's grave is less likely to be guarded. A recent burial ensures the body is still fresh enough for the anatomists, whose needs are exacting. The ground is often frozen, making the task agonizingly slow and silent. You work quickly but without haste, for haste makes noise and noise brings the watchman. The earth gives way layer by painstaking layer. You smell the rich, cold soil, then the faint, sweet decay of wood. When you reach the coffin, you do not disturb it fully. Instead, you cleverly break open one end, often the head end, leaving the rest undisturbed to avoid suspicion. You then use your crowbar to pry off the lid just enough to reach inside. You feel for the head, then the shoulders. With practiced strength, you pull the corpse out of its wooden shell, leaving behind any shroud or burial clothes. The anatomists only want the body itself. The clothes, if removed, would constitute a felony of a different magnitude, a theft of property rather than simply disturbing a grave. This legal loophole, however perverse, is your slim shield against the gallows. Once extracted, the body is quickly bundled into your sack, perhaps over a shoulder or carried between two of you. You fill in the grave, making it appear as undisturbed as possible, a meticulous art in itself. You wipe away any footprints, smooth the earth, and perhaps even replace a few scattered flowers. The entire operation, from the first spadeful of earth to the silent retreat, takes no more than a few hours, ideally less. The journey back is equally perilous. You avoid main thoroughfares, sticking to back alleys and the darkest corners of the city. The weight of your cargo is a constant, chilling reminder of the risk you carry. Every shadow seems to hold a threat, every distant voice a potential alarm. You move with a practiced stealth, a ghost carrying a ghost, through the sleeping city. Your destination is a discreet back entrance to an anatomy school or a private residence where a prominent surgeon conducts his lessons. You deliver your macabre package, and in return you receive your payment. A few shillings, perhaps a guinea, depending on the freshness and quality of your specimen. For a woman's body, the price might be higher, due to their relative scarcity in public executions. For the body of a child, the payment is often depressingly small, a reflection of their lesser anatomical value to students. This money, though earned through a horrifying trade, is often a lifeline. It feeds your family, pays your rent, keeps you from the debtor's prison. You are an outcast, reviled by society, but indispensable to a segment of it. You exist in the shadows, a necessary evil, your identity a closely guarded secret. The public's fear of grave robbing is immense, a primal dread of the desecration of the dead, of the ultimate violation of rest. Families go to extraordinary lengths to protect their loved ones' graves. You might encounter iron cages, called mort safes, placed over fresh graves. These formidable structures of heavy iron bars are designed to deter you. Sometimes stone slabs too heavy to lift are used, or a vigil might be kept, a family member or hired watchman sitting through the night by the fresh grave, a lantern flickering in the cold. These precautions only add to the danger and ingenuity required for your work. You learn to circumvent them, to wait for the mort safe to be removed after weeks when the body is no longer deemed desirable, or to find a way around the watchman's patrol. It is a constant game of cat and mouse, played out under the indifferent gaze of the moon. Despite the revulsion, your grim profession undeniably serves a critical, if dark, purpose. Without you, the understanding of human anatomy would stagnate. Without the bodies you provide, the burgeoning medical schools would struggle to train new doctors and surgeons. You are, in your own way, a catalyst for progress, forcing the advancement of science through the most ethically fraught means imaginable. Your actions, and those of your fellow resurrectionists, eventually highlight a profound societal problem. The sheer horror and public outcry over body snatching eventually force governments to act. The Anatomy Acts, passed in the early 1800s, finally provide a legal framework for the supply of cadavers, primarily from unclaimed bodies in workhouses and hospitals. This legislation, born from the very desperation and fear your trade created, ultimately renders your services obsolete. But before that time you are essential. You are a silent, shadowy figure, your work a testament to the strange, often brutal necessities that shaped life before the modern age. You are a midnight harvester, a grave robber for science, an uncomfortable, yet undeniably vital cog in the machinery of medical discovery. You operate in a moral gray area, despised yet relied upon, a stark reminder of the lengths to which society would go, and the prices some individuals would pay, to push the boundaries of knowledge. You are a living paradox, essential to the dead and to the living, forever haunting the margins of history. The shadows of the night recede with the dawn, and with them the dark commerce of the body snatcher fades, at least for now. But the human body, in its bewildering complexity, continued to present a host of mysteries and maladies that required equally strange and often brutal solutions. The needs of medicine, as understood in past centuries, were vast, and the methods employed to meet them could be truly unsettling. You step away from the grimy alleyways and the freshly turned earth, and find yourself instead at the edge of a different kind of world, one dominated by water, mud, and a pervasive, earthy scent. Imagine the common understanding of illness in a time before germs and antibiotics. For centuries, across much of Europe and beyond, medical theory revolved around the concept of humors. Your body, so it was believed, contained four essential fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Sickness was not caused by external invaders, but by an imbalance in these internal liquids. Too much blood, for example, could cause fever, headaches, and a host of other ailments. The solution, therefore, was simple in its logic, if not its execution: remove the excess. This belief system, deeply ingrained for over 2 millennia, made bloodletting one of the most common medical procedures. You visit a barber surgeon, his shop a bustling hub of minor operations. The air is thick with the metallic tang of blood and the faint smell of stale sweat. A patient, pale and clammy, sits slumped in a chair, their arm extended over a basin. With a quick, practiced hand, the barber surgeon makes a precise incision, and a dark, thick stream of blood begins to flow. But sometimes a more subtle yet equally effective method was preferred. For conditions requiring a gentler, more localized blood removal, or simply when a barber surgeon was unavailable, nature provided its own peculiar solution. Enter the leech. These segmented worms, with their powerful suckers and anticoagulant saliva, were not merely a folk remedy. They were a staple of medical practice, prescribed by physicians for everything from headaches and fevers to skin conditions and inflammations. The demand for leeches, particularly the European medicinal leech, was immense. This widespread demand birthed one of the most unpleasant and surprisingly dangerous professions of the age: the leech collector, or as some called them, the wetland physician. You stand on the edge of a vast, sprawling marshland, a place of low-lying reeds and stagnant pools. The sun beats down, but the air here is heavy, humid, and carries the distinct odor of decaying vegetation and damp earth. Mosquitoes buzz in thick clouds around your head, their incessant whining a constant annoyance. Your boots sink slightly into the soft, muddy ground with every step, the water often reaching above your ankles, sometimes higher. This is your office, your laboratory, your hunting ground. Your tools are minimal. You carry a stout staff, perhaps a sack to hold your precious harvest, and certainly a container for the leeches once they are detached. But the primary tool, the most crucial instrument for this job, is your own body. You are not just collecting the leeches, you are baiting them. You wade into the murky water, the bottom soft and uneven beneath your feet. The water is often cold at first, but quickly warms under the midday sun, becoming a lukewarm, almost soupy embrace. You deliberately expose your legs, sometimes your arms, to the water. You wait. The minutes stretch, marked by the drone of insects and the distant cry of a waterfowl. Then you feel it. A faint, almost imperceptible tug, followed by a slight tingling sensation. It is not painful at first, more like a persistent tickle. You know what it is. A leech has found you. Then another. And another. Soon dozens of these slimy dark creatures are clinging to your skin, their bodies distending as they slowly, steadily engorge themselves on your blood. You do not flinch, at least not outwardly. You cannot afford to. To panic, to thrash, would only make the job harder, and potentially dislodge your valuable quarry before they are ready. You are an expert at this macabre dance, an intimate partner in this strange transaction. You walk slowly through the wetlands, allowing the leeches to find you, to attach themselves, to feed. You are a living lure, a mobile blood bank for these hungry, medically essential creatures. When your legs are sufficiently covered, or when you feel you have collected enough, you carefully begin to detach them. You do not simply pull them off. That can cause the leeches to regurgitate, potentially contaminating them and reducing their medicinal value. Instead, you use your fingers to gently break the seal of their posterior sucker, rolling them off one by one, a painstaking process. As each one comes free, you drop it into a damp, moss-lined container, usually a cloth bag or a small wooden box, ensuring they remain healthy and alive for transport. The sight of your own legs after such a session is not for the faint of heart. Small, circular wounds dot your skin, each one weeping a steady trickle of blood. The leech's saliva contains an anticoagulant, meaning the bleeding will continue for some time, often for hours. This is not merely an inconvenience, it is a serious occupational hazard. Repeated exposure to these wounds, wading through stagnant, bacteria-rich water, opens you up to a terrifying array of infections. Fevers, debilitating rashes, and festering sores are common companions to the leech collector. But the dangers extend beyond mere infection. The very act of wading through these treacherous wetlands presents its own perils. You might stumble and fall, your face plunging into the muddy water, risking suffocation. There are venomous snakes lurking in the reeds, snapping turtles in the deeper pools, and aggressive insects that inflict their own painful bites. Malaria, a scourge of marshy regions, is a constant threat, its debilitating chills and fevers a frequent companion to those who spend their lives immersed in these landscapes. Many leech collectors suffered chronic anemia from repeated blood loss, their bodies constantly depleted, their energy levels dangerously low. The life of a leech collector is one of isolation and hardship. You are often far from towns, spending your days in solitude, surrounded only by the sounds of the marsh. Your clothes are perpetually damp, your skin perpetually scarred. The pay, while perhaps enough to survive, is rarely substantial, reflecting the grim nature of your work and your low social standing. You are seen as a necessary evil, perhaps, someone who handles distasteful creatures for a distasteful purpose. Your hands are rough, your face weathered, your eyes holding a weary knowledge of the wild, untamed corners of nature. Yet you persist. You are a crucial link in the medical chain of your era. Without you, the physicians and barber surgeons of cities and towns would lack a vital tool for their bloodletting practices. You are a supplier to apothecaries, a provider to healers, your cargo of wriggling, blood-filled creatures a source of hope, or at least expectation for countless sufferers. Your work, however grim, is driven by the era's understanding of disease and the desperate need for remedies. As centuries turn and medical science slowly progresses, the humoral theory begins to wane. Microscopes reveal unseen worlds of bacteria and viruses, challenging old assumptions. Bloodletting, once a universal panacea, falls out of favor, slowly giving way to more evidence-based treatments. The demand for leeches, once insatiable, diminishes. Your trade, like that of the body snatcher, becomes less and less relevant. The wetland physicians, those hardy souls who offered their own blood for the sake of collecting another's, eventually become a footnote in history, a testament to the strange and often brutal ways humanity sought to understand and conquer disease before the industrial age illuminated the true nature of the human body. You wipe the mud from your brow, the lingering scent of marshland still clinging to your clothes. The sun dips low, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. You look out over the vast, shimmering expanse of the wetlands, a place that once held such vital, if grotesque, purpose. Your job was a stark reflection of the limitations of knowledge, the deep-seated beliefs, and the incredible lengths to which individuals would go to provide what was deemed essential. It was a life lived on the fringes, immersed in the primal struggle between health and sickness, a true blood harvest, and a testament to the strange and demanding jobs that shaped life in an older, wilder world. The mud and the marshland fade behind you as the winding paths of the countryside give way to the cobblestone chaos of a burgeoning city. The air here is different, thick with the scent of wood smoke, human sweat, and something else, something pungent and unmistakable. You walk down a narrow alley, your boots clacking against the uneven stones. Lean-to shops huddle together, their wares spilling out onto the street. Above, the sky is a patchwork of gray and soot, a stark contrast to the open expanse of the fens. This is a world bustling with human endeavor, a hive of activity where every scrap, every byproduct, every inconvenience, often found an unexpected value. In this older, wilder world, where necessity was truly the mother of invention, you begin to understand that even the most seemingly worthless things could become currency, transformed by the strange alchemy of human need. For some, the streets of London or Paris or any sprawling European city before the dawn of modern sanitation were not just thoroughfares for merchants and grand dames. No, for some, these very streets were their fields, their mines, their daily bread. Your gaze falls upon a figure, hunched over, moving with a peculiar, deliberate gait. They carry a large, lidded basket, perhaps woven from wicker or sturdy reed, and a small, short-handled shovel. This individual is not looking for lost coins nor fallen fruit. Their eyes are fixed on the ground, scanning the uneven surface, seeking out deposits of a very specific kind. This is the pure finder, the gold collector of the canine world. Imagine yourself in their worn, patched clothes, the rough fabric chafing against your skin. The air bites with a chill, or perhaps it hangs heavy and humid, depending on the season. But the job remains the same day in and day out, regardless of the weather. You step around a cluster of children playing with sticks, their laughter echoing off the close-set buildings. A dog, a mangy terrier with matted fur, barks at you from a doorway, then ambles off, leaving its own small, steaming contribution to the urban landscape. The pure finder is quick, practiced. With a flick of the wrist, the shovel scoops up the fresh deposit, depositing it with a soft thud into the basket. There is no grimace, no hesitation. This is simply the task, the rhythm of a life dictated by the practicalities of survival. You follow them for a while, a silent observer in this gritty tableau. You notice the small details, the way they avoid eye contact, the swiftness of their movements, the occasional nod of acknowledgement from a shopkeeper who understands the service they provide, however unsavory it might seem. But why, you wonder, is this seemingly repulsive waste so highly sought after? Why would anyone dedicate their days and often their nights to gathering this particular byproduct of urban life? The answer lies not in the glittering vaults of banks, but in the dark, odorous pits of the tannery. To understand the pure finder's trade, you must first understand the ancient art of leather making. Animal hides, when first stripped from the beast, are stiff, hard, and putrid. They must be cleaned, dehaired, and most crucially softened. This softening process, known as baiting or puring, was a vital step in transforming a raw, inflexible skin into supple, durable leather suitable for shoes, gloves, saddles, and countless other goods. For centuries, before the advent of modern chemistry, the most effective agent for baiting leather was something quite unexpected: the feces of dogs. Yes, specifically, the droppings of canines. These unassuming piles, scattered across the streets, contained a powerful cocktail of enzymes. These enzymes, particularly trypsin, were remarkably efficient at breaking down the proteins and connective tissues in the animal hides, making them pliable, soft, and ready for the next stage of tanning. Without this step, the leather would remain brittle and unusable. So, the pure finder was not merely collecting waste. They were harvesting a crucial industrial ingredient, a biological catalyst, an organic gold. They were the unsung alchemists of the urban jungle, transforming the common refuse of dogs into the foundation for valuable goods. Imagine the sheer volume of dog pure required. In a city like London, with its hundreds of tanneries and a populace that relied heavily on leather products, the demand was constant and enormous. Every street, every alleyway, every market square was a potential source. Dogs, then as now, roamed freely, contributing their daily quota to the city's unique economy. From the pampered lapdogs of the gentry to the scruffy curs scavenging for scraps, every canine was, in a sense, an unwitting participant in the leather trade. The pure finder's day often began before dawn, or extended late into the night, when the streets were quieter, and their work could be done with less scrutiny. You can almost feel the chill of the morning air, hear the distant cries of street hawkers beginning their rounds, and the rustle of straw as they move through the deserted lanes. Your nose wrinkles involuntarily as a wave of the characteristic odor washes over you, a mix of stale urine, decaying refuse, and the sharp, distinctive tang of the pure itself. It is a smell that becomes ingrained, clinging to clothing, skin, and memory. This was not a job for the faint of heart, or the delicate of constitution. It was physically demanding, often dangerous due to the unsanitary conditions and the occasional aggressive dog. And it carried a significant social stigma. To be a pure finder was to be at the very bottom rung of the social ladder, a person whose livelihood depended on handling the most unpleasant of substances. Yet they were indispensable. You watch as the pure finder, their basket now considerably heavier, makes their way towards the river. This is often where the tanneries were located, needing access to ample water for their processes. The sight of a pure finder approaching would be met with anticipation, not disdain, by the tannery foreman. The cargo, though foul-smelling, was precious. Upon arrival, the pure would be carefully weighed and priced. Payment, often in small coin, would exchange hands. Sometimes, the pure finder would even have discerning knowledge about the quality of the pure. Some believed that the droppings of certain types of dogs, or dogs fed a particular diet, yielded a superior product, more potent in its enzymatic activity. A dog that feasted on rich scraps from a butcher's shop might produce finer gold than a hungry stray existing on garbage. This subtle differentiation speaks to the specialized knowledge these collectors possessed, turning an unpleasant task into an expertise. The collected pure was then mixed with water in large vats, creating a foul-smelling slurry. The de-haired hides, after various preparatory steps, would be immersed in this bait solution. The enzymes would go to work, tirelessly breaking down the unwanted components, leaving the leather remarkably soft and pliable. The transformation was truly alchemical, turning waste into wealth, filth into finery. Consider the sheer scale of this operation. Thousands upon thousands of individual deposits, painstakingly gathered by hand, day after day, year after year. It speaks volumes about the resourcefulness and the pragmatic nature of pre-industrial society. No resource, however humble or distasteful, was overlooked if it served a vital purpose. The economy was a vast, intricate web, and the pure finder occupied a crucial, if malodorous, strand within it. Your journey through this old city continues. You pass by open sewers, the air thick with miasma. You see other collectors, perhaps for rags or bones or cinders. Each person, in their own way, is extracting value from the refuse of daily life. But the pure finder's trade stands out for its unique blend of repulsion and necessity. Their tools were simple, their work arduous, and their social standing low. Yet, without them, the vibrant leather industry, which clothed and equipped so many, would have struggled immensely. You pause by a tannery door, the pungent aroma of hides, chemicals, and dog pure wafting out. Inside you can hear the splashing of water, the thud of heavy hides, the shouts of workers. It is a world driven by demand, fueled by ingenuity, and sustained by the unseen labor of people like the pure finder. Their story reminds you that before the sleek efficiency of industrial processes, the world relied on a more direct, often dirtier, and surprisingly organic form of resource management. They were the true alchemists, not turning lead into gold, but transforming canine waste into the supple leather that shod the feet and gloved the hands of the very people who often scorned their existence. It was a strange, vital, and utterly unforgettable job, a testament to the ingenious ways humans adapted and thrived in a world still raw and untamed by modern convenience, finding value in the most unlikely of places. The ingenious ways humans adapted and thrived, finding value in the most unlikely of places, were not always about resource management. Sometimes, survival meant confronting the direct, omnipresent threats that lurked in the very fabric of urban life. As you step away from the tannery, leaving behind the powerful scent of treated hides, you find yourself drawn deeper into the bustling, sometimes unsettling symphony of a pre-industrial town. The narrow streets, cobbled and uneven, are a tapestry of sounds. The clatter of horse hooves, the cries of street vendors, the distant chime of a church bell. But beneath this surface cacophony, there is another, more insidious, hum, a whisper of unseen movement, a scuttling in the shadows, a constant gnawing at the edges of civilization. Imagine yourself in a city where every forgotten corner, every pile of refuse, every dark alleyway, offered sanctuary to an unwelcome resident. These were not just isolated creatures. They were a pervasive, relentless force. They were the rats. Swarms of them. Thousands upon thousands, sleek, quick, and utterly without remorse. They infested cellars, gnawed through grain sacks in storerooms, burrowed into the foundations of homes, and scurried across the rafters of taverns. They were a living, breathing plague, a constant threat to food supplies, to health, and to the very peace of mind of the populace. In this world, where disease often swept through communities like wildfire and starvation was a constant specter, the fight against these vermin was not a luxury, it was a matter of life and death. And so, a new kind of specialist emerged, a figure often solitary and somewhat mysterious, who understood the dark underbelly of the city better than anyone. This was the rat catcher. You might spot one now, a lean figure moving with purpose through the crowded marketplace. Perhaps he carries a sack slung over one shoulder, its contents rattling softly, a mix of traps, baits, and perhaps the squirming bodies of his latest catches. At his heels, a wiry terrier, its ears pricked, its eyes sharp, constantly scanning the ground, sniffing out the telltale scent of its prey. This dog is not just a pet. It is an indispensable partner, trained to hunt and dispatch with deadly efficiency. The rat catcher's tools were simple yet effective. Wooden snap traps, often baited with cheese, stale bread, or rancid meat, were carefully placed in known rat runs, the dark, greasy paths worn by countless generations of rodents. Sometimes, more elaborate cage traps were used, designed to capture multiple rats alive. But the true art of the rat catcher lay not just in setting a trap, but in understanding the psychology of the rat itself. They knew the routes, the feeding times, the nesting habits, and the cleverness of their quarry. Imagine following him into a merchant's storeroom, thick with the smell of dried herbs, spices, and the underlying dampness of centuries-old stone. Here, sacks of grain stand vulnerable, their contents slowly diminishing, contaminated by droppings and urine. The rat catcher points to a hole in the wainscoting, barely visible to your untrained eye. He kneels, his hand disappearing into the darkness, perhaps placing a small, pungent bait. He listens intently, his ear almost pressed to the floor, discerning the faint scratching that tells him a nest is nearby. Sometimes, for more severe infestations, the rat catcher might employ ferrets. These lithe, fearless hunters were sent down burrows and into tight spaces, flushing out the rats into nets or directly into the waiting jaws of a terrier. The scene would be one of frantic chaos, squealing, barking, a whirlwind of fur and teeth, until the pest was subdued. It was a messy, often brutal business, but one that was absolutely necessary. The rat catcher was a paradox in society. On one hand, he was reviled, associated with filth and disease, his profession often seen as ignoble. People might cross the street to avoid him, fearing the contagion he might carry, or simply disgusted by the nature of his work. Yet, he was also indispensable, a silent guardian against the invisible enemy that threatened their very existence. He was the unsung hero who prevented outbreaks of plague, protected precious food stores from destruction, and allowed people to sleep a little sounder at night. Think about the sheer scale of the problem. A single pair of rats can produce hundreds of offspring in a year. Their populations could explode, overwhelming any preventative measures. Without the dedicated effort of rat catchers, cities would have been even more vulnerable to the devastation of the Black Death and other rodent-borne illnesses. For communities facing a severe infestation, the rat catcher was akin to a modern-day Pied Piper, his presence bringing a desperate hope that the tide of vermin could be turned back. While he might not have charmed them with a magical flute, his methods were a form of practical magic, a dark art born of necessity. His work was not just about trapping and killing. It was about surveillance, about understanding the urban ecosystem. He would advise on better waste disposal, on sealing up holes in buildings, on keeping food stored in inaccessible containers. He was, in essence, an early form of public health officer, even if his methods were rudimentary and his social standing low. You follow him as he makes his rounds, moving from one grimy tenement to another, from a baker's shop where flour sacks are regularly breached, to a merchant's warehouse where textiles are gnawed and soiled. Each location presents a unique challenge, a new strategy to employ. He notes the fresh droppings, the faint musky smell that indicates a strong presence. He observes the pathways, the tiny details that tell a story of rodent activity. The dangers of the job were manifold. Rat bites were common, and these bites often led to serious infections, fever, or worse. The rat catcher was constantly exposed to diseases carried by the very creatures he pursued. He worked in dark, cramped, unsanitary conditions, crawling into cellars, climbing into attics, his body often bruised and scratched. His hands would be calloused, his clothes perpetually stained with grime and the occasional smear of blood. Yet there was a quiet dignity to his labor. He was a master of his domain, a skilled professional operating in a field few others dared to tread. His knowledge was hard-won, his expertise invaluable. He represented the sharp edge of human resilience, the determination to carve out a habitable space even in the face of overwhelming natural forces. This was a world before efficient sanitation systems, before chemical pesticides, before a scientific understanding of disease transmission. The fight against pests was a hand-to-hand combat, a continuous war waged by individuals like the rat catcher. Their efforts, often overlooked and underappreciated, formed a vital protective layer for communities struggling to thrive. So, as you stand in the imagined bustling street, the sounds of the past swirling around you, remember the silent, often reviled figure of the rat catcher. He was not just killing rats. He was safeguarding food, preventing epidemics, and maintaining a fragile order. His was another of those strange, indispensable jobs, a testament to the sheer ingenuity and gritty determination required to simply exist and build a society in a world that was far less domesticated than our own. He truly was a Pied Piper, leading the pestilence away one catch at a time. You stand on the bustling street, the imagined sounds of the past beginning to fade into a quieter hum. The rat catcher, a silent guardian against the insidious threats of disease and hunger, has melted back into the shadows from which he emerged. His was a job of combat, a vital necessity against a force of nature. But as the sun begins its slow descent, or even before it rises again, you begin to contemplate a different kind of daily battle, one against the deepest human impulse, the desire for sleep. Imagine the world just as the first glimmer of dawn streaks the sky, or even before, when the darkness still holds the city in its grip. The air is cool, perhaps damp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and the sleeping earth. The gas lamps, if they exist at all in your particular corner of time, cast pools of weak yellow light on cobblestones that still reflect the dampness of night. The only sounds are the distant creaking of a wagon, perhaps a dog barking, and the rustle of the wind. Now think about your own morning routine. The alarm clock, a small device that reliably shatters the peace, bringing you back to the demands of the day. But what if that simple, indispensable piece of technology did not exist? What if there were no clocks ticking reliably beside your bed, no radio programs to rouse you, no glowing digital display to mark the passage of minutes? How would you, a factory worker needing to be at your machine by 5 in the morning, or a market vendor needing to set up your stall before the first customers arrive, ensure you were awake and on time? This was a profound problem in the pre-industrial and early industrial world. With the advent of factories and strict work schedules, punctuality became not just a virtue but an absolute requirement. Miss a shift and you might lose your pay or even your job. Yet, most ordinary people could not afford a grandfather clock, let alone a pocket watch or a sophisticated mechanical alarm. Their lives were governed by the sun, the church bell, and the internal rhythm of their bodies. But the demands of a changing world required something more precise, something more reliable. Enter one of the most remarkable and often overlooked professions of the past, the knocker-up or waker-up. This was a person whose entire livelihood depended on their ability to wake other people from their slumber, ensuring the gears of society continued to turn. Their job was not about fighting pests or mending clothes. It was about orchestrating the very beginning of the working day, one window pane at a time. You are walking through the narrow, unlit streets of a northern English mill town, or perhaps the labyrinthine alleys of an early modern European city. The chill of the pre-dawn air bites at your cheeks. The houses are dark, silent, their windows like unseeing eyes. You might hear the distant cry of a night watchman, his lantern a tiny beacon in the vast darkness. Then a new sound breaks the silence. It is a rhythmic tapping, a persistent, measured rap against an upper-story window. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. It is not aggressive, not violent, but it is insistent. You look up and see a figure, often a man, sometimes a woman, standing patiently in the street below. In their hand they hold a long, slender pole, perhaps made of bamboo or a light wood. Attached to the end of this pole is a wire or a thick, stout piece of leather, designed to make a clear, resonant sound against the glass. This is your knocker-up. For a few pennies a week they are your personal human alarm clock. Their route is meticulously planned, a careful dance through the sleeping city, timed to perfection. They know who needs to be awake at 4, who at 5:30, who at 6. They climb steps, navigate slippery cobblestones and brave the elements, all to deliver that crucial awakening sound. Imagine the skill involved. They must be able to reach windows on second or even third stories. They must know exactly which window belongs to their client, avoiding waking the wrong person, which could lead to an angry complaint and a loss of business. The tap must be loud enough to rouse a heavy sleeper, but not so loud as to shatter the glass or provoke a neighborhood disturbance. It is a delicate balance, a precise art. Sometimes if the pole could not reach, the knocker-up might carry a bag of dried peas or small pebbles. These would be thrown gently but firmly at the window until the client was seen to be awake, perhaps a face appearing, blurry with sleep, at the pane. They would wait, the knocker-up, watching for that sign, that acknowledgement that their job was done for that particular household. Only then would they move on, their pace steady, their mission clear. The knocker-up was an essential cog in the machinery of the Industrial Revolution. Without them, countless factory workers, miners, dock workers, and tradespeople would have struggled to keep their jobs. They were the unsung heroes of punctuality, the quiet orchestrators of the morning rush. Their clients ranged from solitary individuals living in cramped tenements to entire families whose collective income depended on their timely arrival at the mill. Consider the human connection inherent in this job. Unlike a cold, impersonal clock, the knocker-up offered a personal service. They knew their clients, perhaps by name, perhaps by reputation. They knew the rhythms of the community. In a world that was becoming increasingly mechanized, this was a profoundly human interaction, a daily ritual shared between two people. The client trusted the knocker-up to be there, rain or shine, day after day. The knocker-up relied on their reputation, their reliability, to earn their meager living. Their work was demanding. They woke hours before anyone else, often walking miles through the deserted streets, enduring bitter cold, driving rain, or oppressive heat. There was no sick leave, no holiday pay. If they did not knock, they did not get paid. Their success was measured in the simple act of waking, the turning of a light in a dark room, the slow awakening of a house. As the morning light gradually strengthens, the knocker-up's work begins to draw to a close. The first factory whistles might be blowing, the market stalls might be clattering into life. The city, which had been a canvas of shadows and silence, is now slowly filling with the sounds of human activity. Footsteps, distant chatter, the rumbling of carts. The knocker-up, their pole now resting against their shoulder, might pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and head home for a few hours of much-deserved rest, only to repeat the entire routine the next day. This profession, like so many others tied to the specific needs of a particular era, eventually faded away. The mass production of affordable alarm clocks in the late 19th and early 20th centuries rendered the human knocker-up obsolete. The steady tap on the window was replaced by the insistent ring or buzz from a bedside table. The personal touch was sacrificed for convenience and technological efficiency. But for a significant period, the knocker-up was an indispensable figure, a testament to the ingenuity of communities adapting to new industrial rhythms. They were more than just human alarms. They were threads in the social fabric, ensuring that the individual lives of countless workers were synchronized with the larger demands of a rapidly changing world. They remind you that even the most basic functions of daily life, functions we now take for granted, once required a dedicated person, a unique skill, and a journey into the pre-dawn silence. Their legacy is etched not in grand monuments, but in the countless mornings they began, one gentle rhythmic tap at a time. As the knocker-up finished their rounds, stirring life into the pre-dawn gloom, another figure had already begun their vital work hours before, or was just preparing for the twilight descent. If the knocker-up was the human alarm clock of the morning, then the lamplighter was the human switch of the night, holding back the vast, consuming darkness that once defined entire cities after sunset. Imagine yourself in a city centuries ago, a place where the sun's departure was not merely a transition to evening, but a surrender to a world transformed. A world swallowed by an impenetrable blackness that clung to every alley and facade. Before the widespread adoption of public lighting, the night was a truly formidable adversary. You would walk down streets that, by day, teemed with life, now utterly devoid of light, save for the occasional lantern flickering from a window or the hurried flash of a link boy's torch. The darkness was not just an absence of light, it was a physical presence, a palpable blanket that invited fear, crime, and disorientation. Without clear pathways, without the comforting glow of streetlights, simple navigation became a perilous gamble. A wrong turn could lead you into stagnant pools of water, into the path of unseen dangers, or into the clutches of those who thrived in the shadows. The very air seemed to thicken with unspoken threats, and the sounds of the city, usually a vibrant symphony, now became isolated, unnerving whispers. This was the world that the lamplighters stepped into, armed with nothing more than their tools and a profound sense of responsibility. You would see them at dusk, a solitary figure emerging as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues that quickly faded to indigo. Their silhouette would be etched against the fading light, a tall, slender form moving with a deliberate rhythm. They carried a ladder, often strapped to their back, and a long pole or a smaller handheld lamp with a wick and oil. This was their arsenal against the night. Their route was meticulously planned, a series of precise stops that would gradually push back the encroaching darkness. You would hear the scuff of their boots on the cobblestones, the soft clatter of their ladder as it was propped against the lamppost, the careful positioning of their body as they ascended. And then a small spark, a delicate flicker. And suddenly, a pool of light would blossom, a tiny oasis of illumination in the vast expanse of the growing dark. The soft, buttery glow of an oil lamp, the first artificial light to truly conquer the urban night. Each lamp was a small victory, a defiant stand against the encroaching gloom. The lamplighter would climb the ladder, open the glass casing of the lamp, trim the wick, refill the oil if necessary, and then carefully ignite it. The smell of lamp oil and a faint wisp of smoke would drift on the cool evening air, an olfactory signature of their work. Then, with a gentle click, the casing would be sealed and they would descend, moving on to the next one. This ritual would be repeated hundreds of times each evening, lamp after lamp, block after block, until their entire district was transformed from a terrifying black maze into a network of glowing beacons. Think of the relief you would feel as you saw the lamplighter approach. The anxiety of navigating a pitch-black street would begin to recede, replaced by a sense of security and guidance. These individuals were more than just light bringers. They were guardians, beacons of civilization in a world still largely untamed by technology. Their work directly impacted public safety, commerce, and social interaction. Businesses could stay open longer. People could travel more safely between homes and taverns or theaters. The very fabric of urban life, once dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, began to stretch, extending its vibrant threads into the evening hours. But their job was not without its perils. Imagine the biting cold of winter, their fingers stiff and numb as they fumbled with wicks and oil in the freezing air. Or the relentless downpour of a storm, the rain slicking the ladder and threatening to extinguish every carefully lit flame. Their uniform, if they had one, offered little protection against the elements, and their dedication to their route was paramount, regardless of the weather's fury. They also navigated the less savory parts of town, where the flickering light they brought might attract unwanted attention. Thieves and vagrants often lurked in the very shadows the lamplighters sought to dispel, creating a constant tension between their illuminating duty and their personal safety. They were alone in the deepening night, a solitary figure pushing back against the dark, often in silence save for the sounds of their own labor. As cities grew and technology advanced, the oil lamps gave way to gaslight. The job of the lamplighter evolved. Now, instead of refilling oil, they would carry a long pole with a small flame at its tip. You would watch as they deftly reached up, turning a valve and then igniting the gas with a precise flick of their wrist. The hiss of the gas, followed by the satisfying pop of ignition, signaled a brighter, more powerful light than the old oil lamps could ever produce. Gaslights cast a wider, more consistent glow, further transforming the urban landscape. But even with this technological leap, the human touch remained essential. Each lamp still required individual attention at dusk and again at dawn, when the lamplighter would return to extinguish them, saving precious resources and plunging the city back into its natural state of daytime brightness. The daily cycle of light and dark, managed by these dedicated individuals, continued for decades, even centuries in some places. They became familiar faces and expected part of the urban tableau. You might nod to them as they passed, a silent acknowledgement of their vital, often thankless, work. They were the unsung heroes of the night, responsible for a comfort and safety we now take entirely for granted. Eventually, the soft hiss of gaslight was replaced by the stark, instant illumination of electricity. The long poles and the climbing ladders became relics of a bygone era. Electric streetlights, powered by vast central grids, could be switched on and off with a single command, rendering the individual lamplighter obsolete. Their steady pace, their precise movements, their solitary vigil against the dark, all became footnotes in the grand march of progress. Yet, their legacy endures in the very concept of public safety after dark, in the expectation that our streets will be illuminated and navigable, no matter the hour. The lamplighter reminds you that even the most fundamental aspects of modern life, like the simple act of seeing in the dark, were once the specialized and demanding work of a dedicated human being, a true torchbearer against the twilight. You just considered the lamplighters, those silent sentinels of the urban night, whose dedicated labor kept the darkness at bay. Their job, while vital, dealt with the public sphere with the outward face of civilization. Now, imagine a role so profoundly intimate, so utterly personal, that it plunges you into the very private chambers of majesty, a world of velvet and silk, but also of unspoken necessities. This is a journey into the life of the groom of the stool, a position that embodies the strange blend of servility and power, a job utterly vital to the physical comfort, and often the political well-being of the monarch. Picture yourself in a grand Tudor palace, the air thick with the scent of beeswax, aged wood, and perhaps a faint, lingering perfume. You are no ordinary servant. You are an individual of high standing, perhaps a nobleman yourself, yet your primary duty revolves around the most basic biological function of your sovereign. Your job is to attend to the king or queen when they relieve themselves. It is a task that defies modern sensibilities, yet it was a cornerstone of royal court life for centuries. Consider for a moment the sheer lack of privacy that defined the lives of monarchs. Every aspect of their existence, from waking to sleeping, from dining to dressing, was a public spectacle, a performance of power and prestige. Even their most personal moments required attendance, a retinue of watchful eyes. And of all these moments, none was more sensitive, more essential, and more potentially revealing than the royal privy. The term itself, groom of the stool, sounds almost comical to modern ears, but its meaning was literal and profound. The stool referred to the royal commode, an elaborately carved, often velvet-covered, portable toilet. It was not a hidden chamber, a private sanctuary behind a locked door as we understand it today. Instead, it was an item brought to the monarch's bedchamber or an antechamber, and it was your duty to prepare it. You would oversee the placement of the royal stool, ensure its cleanliness, and arrange the necessary linen or cloths. But your duties extended far beyond mere sanitation. You were the one who helped the monarch disrobe for the act, adjusting their heavy, layered garments. You were the one who offered assistance as they sat upon the commode. You were the one who, once they were finished, helped them cleanse themselves, performing a service that today would be considered unthinkable for anyone but a nurse or a parent with an infant. You would then help them redress, carefully smoothing their robes and adjusting their ruffles. This was not a job for the faint of heart, nor for someone easily embarrassed. It required an immense degree of discretion, a steady hand, and an unwavering loyalty. Imagine the intimate conversations, the unguarded moments, the quiet observations that would transpire during these sessions. When the king was most vulnerable, physically and perhaps even emotionally, you were there, a silent, watchful presence. But your responsibilities were not solely physical. The groom of the stool was often a trusted confidant, an advisor whose proximity to the monarch gave them unparalleled influence. Because you observed the monarch's bodily functions so closely, you were also a vital link to their health. You would meticulously record the color, consistency, and frequency of their bowel movements. These detailed observations were crucial for the royal physicians, offering insights into the monarch's diet and general well-being. A change in the royal stool could signal illness, requiring immediate attention. You were, in essence, the monarch's most intimate health monitor. This close observation meant you held a unique power over the king or queen's access to their physicians and the interpretation of their health. You could influence their diet, suggest remedies, and even control who was allowed into the royal chambers based on your assessment of the monarch's condition. The prestige of this position cannot be overstated. Far from being a lowly servant, the groom of the stool was usually a highly favored nobleman, a knight, or a lord. Their appointment was a clear sign of the monarch's absolute trust. For example, during the Tudor era, the groom of the stool was often one of the highest-ranking officials in the Privy Chamber. To hold this office meant you had the king's ear, a private and almost constant channel to the most powerful person in the realm. You would have been privy to state secrets whispered in moments of vulnerability. You would have heard the monarch's unguarded thoughts on political rivals, on foreign policy, on matters of love and succession. This access made you a formidable figure at court. Courtiers would vie for your favor, knowing that a word from you in the right ear at the right moment could mean the difference between advancement and ruin. Think of Henry VII, the first Tudor king. He created the position of groom of the stool as a principal office. His groom would have been intimately involved in managing the king's personal finances and even holding the Privy Seal, a crucial instrument of royal authority. This was a man who literally held the keys to the king's most private moments, and by extension, a significant degree of power within the kingdom. When Henry VIII came to the throne, his groom of the stool continued to be a figure of immense influence. This was not a backroom job. It was a frontline position, a blend of personal service and high politics. Imagine yourself as one of these grooms, assisting the notoriously demanding Henry VIII. You would be one of the few individuals who saw past the formidable monarch, the larger-than-life figure, to the man beneath the robes, susceptible to the same human needs as anyone else. Your composure, your discretion, and your ability to manage both the practicalities of the role and the political undercurrents of the court would define your success. Even during the brief reign of the young King Edward VI, the position of groom of the stool remained crucial. As a minor king, Edward's personal care and health were paramount, and his groom of the stool would have played an even more paternal role, overseeing his daily routines and reporting on his delicate constitution. The intimacy of the role extended beyond the act itself. You would be involved in the monarch's morning rituals, assisting with washing, dressing, and perhaps even shaving. You were essentially the monarch's personal assistant, butler, nurse, and confidant, all rolled into one, but always with that central defining task of attending to the stool. As the centuries progressed and court etiquette evolved, the literal duties of the groom of the stool became less hands-on. By the time of the later Stuart monarchs and certainly the Hanoverians, the role transformed into a more symbolic honor. While the title remained, the direct, personal attendance for bodily functions lessened. The evolution of privacy, the changing dynamics of royal power, and the development of more sophisticated sanitary arrangements slowly rendered the initial, very physical aspects of the job obsolete. The rise of private water closets and more discreet plumbing systems eventually removed the need for a portable commode and its dedicated attendant. Yet, the legacy of the groom of the stool remains a fascinating window into the past. It reveals a world where power was so concentrated, and the monarch so central, that even their most mundane physical acts required a specific high-ranking servant. It reminds you that the boundaries between public and private, between servant and confidant, were far more fluid in pre-industrial courts than they are today. It forces you to consider the paradox. The person who held perhaps the most intimate and seemingly humble position was simultaneously one of the most powerful and trusted figures in the kingdom. Their influence was not derived from martial prowess or intellectual brilliance alone, but from the simple, profound fact of their constant personal access to the monarch during moments of utter vulnerability. So, as you step back from the royal bedchamber, leaving behind the echoes of quiet conversations and the faint scent of past perfumes, you carry with you a deeper understanding of the incredible diversity of human labor, and the extraordinary lengths to which societies went to cater to the needs, both grand and small, of their leaders. From illuminating city streets to managing the royal posterior, these were the unseen, often unglamorous, but utterly indispensable roles that kept the gears of their world turning. These specialized vocations, born of necessity and social structure, paint a vivid picture of a world far removed from our own, where every task, no matter how humble or grand, had a dedicated hand to perform it. The world we have explored, a tapestry woven with rolls of precise purpose, extended far beyond the gilded cages of royalty and the bustling streets lit by lamplighters. It reached down, deep into the very heart of the urban landscape, to places where the river itself became a stage for human enterprise. Leave behind the hushed reverence of the palace and the structured order of the city proper. Now you stand on the gritty edge of a great river, let us say the Thames in 18th century London, or perhaps the Seine in Paris a century earlier. The air here is different. It is thick with the scent of damp earth, brackish water, and an underlying musk of human industry and waste. The tide is out. It has retreated, drawing back its gray-green skirts to reveal a vast, exposed expanse of mud and shingle, stretching like an alien landscape beneath the low-slung clouds. This is not a place of manicured parks or grand buildings. This is the domain of the river itself, a transient, ever-changing environment, and it is here that a different kind of worker plies their trade. They are the river scavengers, the mudlarks, the gruel gatherers, a testament to human ingenuity and desperation in equal measure. You watch them as they emerge from the shadows of bridges and the narrow lanes that spill onto the shore. They are a motley crew, often children barely old enough to walk steadily on the slick banks, their faces smudged with dirt, their clothes ragged and patched. Older men and women, bent with age and hardship, move among them, their movements slow but deliberate, their eyes scanning the wet, gleaming surface of the exposed riverbed. Their tools are simple: a stick, perhaps, to prod the mud, a sack or a basket slung over a shoulder to hold their meager finds. But their most important tools are their eyes, sharp and practiced, honed by years of searching for the infinitesimal glint of something valuable amidst the detritus of a bustling city. You observe their methodical pace. They do not rush. Rushing here means slipping, falling, perhaps losing a precious find, or even being pulled under by the treacherous, deep mud. The river you see is not just a thoroughfare for ships and barges. It is the city's great drain, its open sewer, its accidental archive. Everything that was dropped, lost, thrown away, or washed down from the streets above eventually found its way into these murky depths. And twice a day, when the tide receded, the river offered up its secrets, a silent, mucky challenge to those brave or desperate enough to seek them out. Imagine yourself among them now. Feel the cold, damp squelch of the mud beneath your worn boots. The chill penetrates to your bones, even on a summer's day, for the river's breath is always cool and laden with moisture. The air is filled not just with smells, but with the distant clang of a blacksmith, the cries of street hawkers from the embankments above, and the ceaseless, murmurous rush of the river's main channel further out. Close by, you hear the quiet, rhythmic plop of a stick probing the mud, the occasional grunt of effort, and the soft splash as someone steps too close to the retreating water. You bend low, squinting, trying to see what these seasoned scavengers see. At first, all you discern is an undifferentiated mass of gray-brown goo, studded with pebbles and the occasional larger piece of debris, perhaps a broken bottle or a splintered plank of wood. But then your eyes begin to adjust, to learn the subtle language of the riverbed. A faint shimmer, a slight variation in texture, a shape that seems unnaturally regular amidst the chaos of natural forms. The mudlarks are searching for anything that can be sold, bartered, or even eaten. Coins, of course, are the ultimate prize. A silver shilling, a copper penny. Even a half-farthing could mean a meal, a measure of ale, or a night's shelter from the biting cold. These coins, often blackened and encrusted with mud, tell silent tales of carelessness or sudden misfortune. A merchant fumbling in his purse, a sailor dropping his wages, a gambler losing his last coin in a moment of despair. Each coin retrieved is a tiny victory, a tangible link to the unseen dramas of the city above. But it is not just money they seek. Bits of metal are highly prized. Lead, for example, could be melted down and recast. Iron scraps could be sold to the blacksmith or recycled in countless ways. Imagine the delight upon finding a usable nail, a buckle, or a key. These seemingly insignificant items held real value in a world where everything was reused until it fell apart. You might see one scavenger carefully extracting a fragment of pottery, perhaps a piece of delftware or stoneware, its intricate pattern still visible despite the grime. These shards, though broken, were not worthless. They could be collected, sometimes pieced together by ingenious hawkers, or even sold to collectors who appreciated the craftsmanship of earlier eras. A broken pipe stem, a clay marble, a button fashioned from bone or metal. Each item, however small, represented a potential transaction, a tiny infusion of value into their otherwise precarious lives. Sometimes the river yields more personal items. A thimble, dropped by a seamstress leaning too far over the embankment. An ornate ring, perhaps a family heirloom, slipped from a cold finger. A small pewter toy, lost by a child playing too close to the treacherous edge. These finds carry a poignant weight, whispers of forgotten lives and sudden losses. They are not just objects, they are echoes of human stories. The scavengers also sought organic matter. Bones, for instance, particularly those from animals, could be ground down for fertilizer or used in various manufacturing processes. Sometimes they even found food. Scraps of meat, vegetables, or even the occasional drowned fish, if fresh enough, might be salvaged, cooked, and eaten, a desperate supplement to a meager diet. This was a world of absolute scarcity for many, where nothing was wasted, and every potential resource was scrutinized. The work was relentless, often solitary, and always dangerous. The rising tide was a constant threat, capable of sweeping an unwary scavenger off their feet or trapping them against a structure. Disease was rampant, spread by the polluted waters. Cuts and scrapes from sharp objects hidden in the mud could fester and turn deadly. Rivalry among scavengers was not uncommon, though often a silent, watchful competition rather than overt conflict. Each person knew their patch and understood the unspoken rules of this harsh landscape. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, the scavengers begin to retreat. Their sacks, though rarely heavy, now hold the promise of a meal, a few hours of warmth, or perhaps a small, brief comfort. They trudge back up the slick, muddy paths, their silhouettes stark against the fading light, leaving the riverbed to the encroaching tide and the lonely cries of gulls. The river, in a sense, was a living, breathing marketplace, constantly replenished by the city's ceaseless activity and offering its wares to those with the courage and patience to retrieve them. These mudlarks, these forgotten figures of history, played a vital, if unsung, role in the urban ecosystem of the pre-industrial age. They were the original recyclers, the uncommissioned archivists, painstakingly gathering the fragments of daily life that would otherwise be lost to the depths forever. Their existence reminds you that even at the very bottom of the social hierarchy, people found ways to survive, to extract value, and to contribute to the economic fabric of their world. Their labor was dirty, dangerous, and utterly unglamorous, yet it was a specialized skill, passed down through generations of poverty, a profound example of how human ingenuity adapts to the harshest of circumstances. They were not just picking up trash, they were weaving themselves into the very fabric of the city's pulse, a silent, essential beat heard only by those who listened closely to the murmurs of the river. Their finds, from a broken pipe to a tarnished coin, were not merely objects. They were echoes of a world long past, brought to light by the persistent hands of those who lived literally on the edge. From the very fringes of society, where survival meant sifting through refuse, we now turn our gaze to the gilded cages of power, where even the highest echelons of society created roles equally strange for those who served at the monarch's pleasure. Here, amidst velvet and silk, you find jobs that defy modern logic, yet were profoundly significant in their time. These are the positions born not of necessity to scavenge, but of the peculiar demands of divinity, status, and the isolated lives of royalty. Imagine, if you will, a world where a child, often of noble birth himself, was literally punished for the misdeeds of a young prince or princess. This was the role of the whipping boy, a unique and somewhat unsettling fixture in several European monarchies, particularly in England, during the Tudor and Stuart periods. You might hear this term today used colloquially to describe someone who takes the blame for another's mistakes, but its origins are far more literal and far more poignant. The logic behind this bizarre practice was rooted in the divine right of kings. Royal children were often considered too sacred to be physically disciplined by mere commoners, or even by their tutors. To lay a hand on a future monarch was an unthinkable transgression. Yet, as any parent knows, even royal children misbehave. They throw tantrums, they shirk their lessons, they display a very human stubbornness. So, how do you instill discipline without directly punishing the untouchable heir? You introduce a proxy. You introduce the whipping boy. This boy, usually a few years older than the young prince or princess, would be raised alongside the royal child from infancy. He was educated with the prince, shared his lessons, his playtime, and often his closest confidences. They would form an intense bond, a brotherhood or sisterhood born of constant proximity. This bond was crucial, for it was the very thing that made the system work. When the royal child committed an offense, it was the whipping boy who would be brought forward. You would stand there watching as your closest companion, your playmate, your intellectual equal, received the physical blows meant for you. The theory was that the prince, witnessing the suffering of his friend, would be so overcome with guilt and sympathy that he would be deterred from repeating the transgression. It was a psychological torment as much as a physical one, designed to leverage the prince's affection and empathy. Think about the profound emotional weight of this arrangement. On one hand, the whipping boy endured physical pain. On the other, the prince was forced to confront the direct consequences of his actions through the suffering of someone he cared deeply for. This created a complex dynamic of guilt, affection, and perhaps even resentment. It was a cruel form of behavioral conditioning, not unlike the elaborate and often harsh methods used to train animals, but applied to human children, one of whom was destined for a throne. The whipping boy was not a common servant. Far from it. He was chosen for his intelligence, his good character, and his ability to form a strong bond with the royal child. He often came from a noble, though lesser, family, and his position at court was one of honor, despite its painful duties. He was educated by the finest tutors, had access to the royal household, and was privy to conversations and secrets that no other commoner would ever hear. His proximity to power could, and often did, lead to significant advancement later in life. Many whipping boys went on to become trusted advisors, diplomats, or even high-ranking officials once their royal charge ascended the throne. Consider the famous example of William Murray, who served as the whipping boy to Charles I of England. They grew up together, forming an unbreakable bond. When Charles became king, Murray remained one of his most trusted confidants, eventually being granted a peerage as Earl of Dysart. This was not a job without potential reward, but the cost, in terms of personal dignity and physical pain during formative years, was immense. Another well-documented instance is Barnaby Fitzpatrick, who was the whipping boy to Edward VI, the son of Henry VIII. Fitzpatrick was a well-educated Irish nobleman, chosen specifically for this role. Imagine the shared childhood, the secrets whispered in confidence, the intense pressure of such an upbringing. These boys were not just receiving punishment, they were absorbing the very nature of royal responsibility, experiencing the burden of leadership through proxy. They understood, perhaps better than anyone, the immense isolation and the strange privileges of a monarch's life. This role extended beyond simple childhood discipline. The concept of a royal scapegoat broadened to include individuals who would take the blame for political missteps or unpopular decisions made by the monarch. While not physically whipped, these individuals bore the brunt of public or courtly disapproval, protecting the king or queen from direct criticism. They were the lightning rods for discontent, deflecting anger away from the sacred person of the monarch. Their job was to absorb the negativity, to be the designated fall guy, maintaining the illusion of the monarch's infallibility or good judgment. This shows you a deep-seated desire to preserve the sanctity and authority of the monarchy, even if it meant sacrificing the reputation or well-being of a loyal servant. These roles, whether literal whipping boys or political scapegoats, highlight the unique and often bizarre ways that power was maintained and expressed in pre-industrial societies. They remind you that the human imagination, when combined with absolute power, can conjure up customs and positions that seem utterly alien to us today. You can almost feel the tension in the royal schoolroom, the silent communication between prince and whipping boy, the unspoken understanding of their strange, symbiotic relationship. It was a life of privilege, yes, but one shadowed by the constant threat of undeserved pain. It was a job that required an extraordinary level of loyalty, resilience, and a profound, if sometimes conflicted, love for the person you served. Their stories offer a unique window into the inner workings of royal courts, revealing the hidden sacrifices made to uphold the myth of divine rule, and the strange, often heartbreaking bonds forged in the shadow of the throne. You might think that the hidden sacrifices in the shadow of the throne represent the peak of unusual emotional labor. But what if emotion itself became a commodity, openly displayed, meticulously orchestrated, and crucial for social standing. What if you could rent grief, hire sorrow, and commission a spectacle of despair? Step with me now, away from the hushed corridors of power, and into the bustling streets where the cycle of life and death played out with a dramatic flair that might astound you. Imagine a time before the cold, silent solemnity of modern funerals, a time when death demanded a different kind of public performance. You are attending a funeral in an ancient city, perhaps Rome or Egypt, or a bustling village in the Middle East. The air is thick with the scent of incense, the murmur of the crowd, and then, a sound unlike any you have heard before. A wail. Not just a cry, but a piercing, sustained lament that seems to tear at the very fabric of the air, followed by another and another, until a chorus of anguish fills the street. These are not necessarily the immediate family members, although their grief is undoubtedly real. These are the professional mourners. The Prefiki of ancient Rome, the Keening women of Ireland, the Nawan of China, the Miriamin of the Middle East. Women and sometimes men whose job it was to weep for hire. Their profession was an integral part of funerary rites across countless cultures, spanning millennia from ancient civilizations to surprisingly recent history in some parts of the world. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of the procession. The deceased, perhaps a person of wealth or standing, is being carried through the streets. Leading the way or flanking the bier are figures draped in somber colors, their faces contorted in sorrow. They beat their breasts, tear at their hair, or perhaps scratch their cheeks, sometimes even drawing blood. Their voices rise and fall in a cacophony of sorrow, a choreographed symphony of despair that ensures everyone within earshot knows a significant person has passed. Why would a family hire strangers to perform such an intimate emotion? The reasons are complex, deeply rooted in social custom, religious belief, and the powerful human need to commemorate the dead. In many ancient societies, the louder and more elaborate the mourning, the more esteemed the deceased was considered to be. A silent funeral was unthinkable, a sign of disrespect, a blot on the family's honor. The professional mourners therefore were not merely actors, they were status symbols. Their presence amplified the family's wealth and influence, signaling to the community that the deceased was important enough to warrant such a grand and vociferous send-off. Consider the practicality of it. In large households, especially among the wealthy, the family itself might not be numerous enough to generate the desired volume of grief. Or perhaps social etiquette dictated a certain decorum for the bereaved, preventing them from indulging in the full, uninhibited display of sorrow expected by tradition. The professional mourners filled this void, embodying the collective grief of the community, ensuring that the proper level of public lamentation was met. They created an atmosphere that drew everyone in, compelling onlookers to reflect on mortality and the significance of the departed. In ancient Egypt, the practice was particularly formalized. You would see women, often two of them, representing the goddesses Isis and Nephthys, following the funeral procession, mimicking the grief of the divine sisters for Osiris. Their wails and gestures were not just for show, they were believed to assist the deceased soul on its journey to the afterlife, warding off malevolent spirits and guiding the Ka and Ba, the soul's spiritual components. Their performance was a sacred duty, intertwined with profound spiritual beliefs. Travel to ancient Rome, and you would encounter the Prefiki, women hired to sing dirges and lead the lamentations. They would often walk ahead of the corpse, reciting praises for the deceased, celebrating their virtues, and articulating the sorrow of the living. Their performances were so theatrical that Roman satirists sometimes poked fun at them, noting their ability to switch instantly from tearful wailing to cheerful conversation once their shift was over. Yet even in satire, the underlying importance of their role was clear. Their presence validated the deceased's life and the family's standing. Imagine the skill required for such a profession. This was not simply a matter of shedding tears on demand, although that was certainly part of it. It involved a deep understanding of funerary rituals, a powerful singing voice, an ability to improvise laments, and an almost superhuman emotional endurance. These women had to channel intense grief, sometimes for hours, across multiple days of mourning. They had to know how to escalate the emotion, how to sustain it, and how to bring it to a crescendo that would resonate with the onlookers. Their faces were canvases of sorrow, their bodies instruments of anguish. You can almost hear the rhythmic keening of the Irish professional mourners, who continued this tradition well into the 20th century in some rural areas. The Bean Caoint, or keening woman, possessed an incredible vocal range, moving from guttural sobs to high-pitched, almost melodic wails, often incorporating extemporaneous poetry that celebrated the life of the deceased. Their performance was a form of oral history, a public eulogy, and a deeply emotional release all rolled into one. It was a communal expression of grief, allowing those who felt a loss to join in the collective sorrow, finding solace in shared lament. This was a job that demanded a unique kind of resilience. Day after day, these individuals immersed themselves in the darkest human emotions, carrying the burden of simulated sorrow for strangers. They walked a fine line between authentic feeling and performance, blurring the boundaries of genuine grief. One can only wonder about the psychological toll this might have taken, constantly confronting mortality and channeling profound sadness. Did they become desensitized, or did each funeral leave its own subtle mark? The practice began to decline in many parts of the world as societies industrialized and attitudes towards death and public mourning shifted. The rise of organized religions often brought more structured, less outwardly performative rituals. The emphasis moved from loud, public displays to quieter, more private expressions of grief. Yet, echoes of professional mourning persist even today in some cultures, in the form of traditional funeral singers, or specific community members expected to lead the lamentations. So, when you reflect on these professional mourners, what do you see? You see a job born out of deep cultural needs, a testament to the human desire to honor the dead, and a fascinating example of how emotion itself can become a service, a skill, a profession. It reveals societies where the boundaries between public and private emotion were very different, where grief was not something to be hidden, but something to be performed, observed, and shared. It reminds you that the ways we cope with loss are as varied and inventive as humanity itself, always shaped by the unique demands of our time and place. This was a job that didn't just ease the passage of the dead, it also helped the living navigate the tumultuous waters of loss, offering a communal embrace of sorrow in a world that often valued loud, expressive displays of feeling. It was a poignant, powerful, and undeniably strange way to earn a living, selling the very rawest of human emotions. You stand now at a different precipice, peering into an abyss of fear and contagion that makes even the most profound grief seem a private sorrow. Imagine a world plunged into an unimaginable darkness, not of night but of plague. You are transported to the narrow, winding streets of a European city in the 14th century. The air is thick, not just with the usual smells of refuse and humanity, but with something far more sinister: the metallic tang of sickness, the sickly sweet odor of decay, and the ever-present stench of fear. You hear the cries of the sick, the tolling of church bells that mark another soul lost, the hushed whispers of panic. Every shadow seems to hold a threat. Every cough a potential death sentence. The Black Death sweeps through communities like an invisible scythe, indiscriminate and relentless. One day your neighbor is healthy, the next they are racked with fever, their skin darkening, their body covered in horrific swellings. Panic is a contagion all its own, spreading faster than the disease itself. People flee, but there is nowhere to run. Families are torn apart. Society buckles under the strain. In this landscape of despair, where death is not an abstract concept but a constant, physical presence, a unique figure emerges from the encroaching shadows. They are the plague doctors, the grim healers, the beaked sentinels of a dying age. Their very appearance is designed to strike fear, not into the hearts of the sick, but perhaps into the very disease they battled. You see them approach and your breath catches in your throat. They are figures of macabre authority, draped in long heavy coats made of waxed canvas or leather. These coats are often black, making them seem like harbingers of doom rather than saviors. Their heads are covered by hoods and their hands by gloves, leaving no skin exposed to the perceived miasma of the plague. But it is their mask, their iconic, terrifying mask, that truly defines them. It is a leather mask, often crafted to resemble a bird's beak. This long, pointed protrusion extends far in front of the doctor's face, creating an unnerving, almost inhuman silhouette. Within this beak you would find aromatic herbs, spices and dried flowers, substances like mint, camphor, cloves and myrrh. The belief was that these strong scents would filter the putrid air, purifying it and protecting the doctor from the bad air, or miasma, that was then thought to cause the plague. It was a crude, desperate form of biological warfare, fought with perfume against an invisible enemy. The eye holes of the mask are covered with clear glass, giving the doctor an alien, unblinking gaze that seems to pierce through the despair. They carry a wooden stick or often a pointer, which is not merely a walking aid. This stick serves multiple purposes. It allows them to prod and examine patients without direct contact, to point out infections or lesions from a distance, and to keep frantic family members at bay. It is a tool of both diagnosis and defense. Imagine the sheer courage, or perhaps the sheer desperation, it took to walk into homes riddled with the plague. These doctors, often secondary physicians who could not secure positions elsewhere, were hired by cities to care for the sick, regardless of their wealth or social standing. Some were genuine medical practitioners. Others were mere charlatans capitalizing on the widespread fear. Yet they all shared the same perilous calling. Your gaze follows one of these figures as they enter a plague-stricken home. The air inside is heavy, thick with the smell of illness and death. You hear the shallow, labored breathing of the patient. The doctor does not hesitate. They move with a strange, deliberate grace, their beaked mask turning slowly as they survey the scene. They examine the patient, perhaps using their stick to lift a blanket or turn a limb. You might hear them ask questions, their voice muffled and distorted by the mask, about the onset of symptoms, the pain, the telltale buboes, the swollen, painful lymph nodes that were the hallmark of the disease. These buboes, often found in the groin, armpits, or neck, would be lanced by the doctor, a painful and often futile attempt to drain the pus and release the sickness from the body. You can almost hear the patient's cry of agony. Their treatments were rudimentary, often ineffective, and sometimes barbaric. Besides lancing buboes, they might prescribe bloodletting, a common practice of the era, believing it would remove impurities from the blood. Herbal remedies, poultices, and even magical charms were also part of their arsenal, a mix of primitive medicine and superstitious belief, reflecting the era's profound lack of scientific understanding about infectious disease. They simply did not know that fleas-carrying bacteria were the true culprits. To them, the plague was a terrifying, incomprehensible wrath, a divine punishment, or a malign influence in the very air. Beyond direct treatment, these doctors had other crucial, albeit grim, duties. They often recorded the number of dead, noting wills, and documenting the final wishes of those succumbing to the plague. They were, in essence, the last point of contact for many, a somber intermediary between the living and the rapidly swelling ranks of the dead. Their presence offered a flicker of hope, however faint, that someone, anyone, was fighting back against the relentless march of death. The job carried immense personal risk. Many plague doctors themselves succumbed to the disease, despite their protective gear and aromatic herbs. Their pay was often generous, a reflection of the danger and the essential, if often ineffective, service they provided. But money could not buy immunity. You wonder if they ever truly got used to the constant proximity to death, to the sheer volume of suffering they witnessed day after day. These were not heroes in shining armor, perhaps, but they were figures of undeniable courage. They stepped into the void when others fled, facing down an invisible enemy that decimated populations and reshaped societies. They were grim reapers in their own right, yet they also represented a desperate human attempt to control the uncontrollable, to bring some semblance of order to utter chaos. So, when you consider these beaked sentinels, what do you truly see? You see a profession born from the crucible of a global pandemic, a testament to humanity's resilience and inventiveness in the face of annihilation. You see the collision of emerging medical thought with deeply ingrained superstition. You see individuals willing to brave the very brink of death for a city's contract, or perhaps for a deeply held, if flawed, sense of duty. They represent a stark illustration of how society adapts when pushed to its breaking point. Their strange, fearsome attire, their desperate, often futile treatments, and their daily walk through death itself paint a vivid picture of a world gripped by an existential terror. They were the grim healers, the last resort, the enduring symbols of a time when the greatest threat came not from an invading army, but from a microscopic foe that changed the course of history. Their presence was a constant, stark reminder of the fragile line between life and oblivion, a chilling tableau of what it meant to live and die in the shadow of the Black Death. You stand on the precipice of immense suffering, having witnessed the grim and necessary work of those who battled the invisible enemy. But even in the shadow of oblivion, life persisted. Communities, families, and individuals carried on. And to carry on, they needed to know. They needed to connect. They needed news. Imagine a world without your daily newspaper, your radio broadcasts, your television reports, or the instantaneous cascade of information from the internet. Imagine a world where the horizon was the limit of your immediate sight, and what happened just one village over felt like a distant land. How did the news travel then? How did people learn about the harvest in the next valley, the proclamation from the king, the arrival of new goods, or the latest rumors of war? This was the domain of the living newspaper. Information not etched in print, but carried on the breath of men and women. News not broadcast over airwaves but rung out from a bell, sung in a tavern, or whispered across a market stall. These were the voices of the village square, the strange and essential communicators who stitched together the fabric of knowledge in a pre-industrial age. You are walking through a bustling market square. The air is thick with the scent of freshly baked bread, roasting meat, and the earthy aroma of piled vegetables. The cacophony of haggling voices, the bleating of livestock, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer form a vibrant backdrop. Then a new sound cuts through the din. A sharp, insistent ringing growing louder. It is the bell. The town crier. You see him now, a figure of authority and daily necessity, striding through the crowd. His voice, trained to project without amplification, booms across the square. Hear him now as he stops, takes a deep breath, and begins to speak. His words are not merely announcements, they are the official pulse of the community. Hear ye, he calls, his voice resonating with practiced power. By order of the guild master, all merchants are reminded of tomorrow's tax collection at the 10th hour. Or perhaps, a new decree from the lord of the manor. All able-bodied men are summoned for road repairs at the dawn of the next week. He might announce a lost child, a runaway apprentice, or even the public punishment of a petty thief. He is the unfiltered, unadorned voice of government and civic life, a direct link between the powers that be and the common folk. His reliability is paramount, his clarity essential. His job is not just to speak but to be heard, understood, and trusted. He is the human megaphone, the public address system of his era, a job without which local governance would grind to a halt. But news was not only official. It was also personal, entertaining, and often carried on the wings of song. Move away from the crier, deeper into the tavern's smoky embrace, or perhaps to a shaded corner of the market where a small crowd gathers. Here you encounter another essential news bearer, the balladeer or the minstrel. His lute strums a captivating melody, drawing you closer. His voice, perhaps rough-hewn from countless performances, begins to tell a tale. It is not just a song, it is a narrative. He sings of heroes and villains, of battles won and lost in distant lands, of scandalous affairs within the local nobility, or of great feats of engineering in faraway cities. He is the traveling journalist, the human newspaper column, weaving current events and historical accounts into memorable verses. Through his art, news of a royal wedding in a distant kingdom could travel hundreds of miles, reimagined and embellished with each performance. The tragedy of a recent shipwreck, or the triumph of a new agricultural technique, became part of the collective consciousness, not through dry reports, but through stirring melodies and poignant lyrics. You listen, enchanted as the story unfolds, seeing the faces in the crowd reflect the emotions of the tale. The balladeer made the distant immediate, the abstract personal, and the fleeting memorable. His craft was not just entertainment, it was education, moral instruction, and a vital conduit of information that connected isolated communities to the wider world. Beyond the formal pronouncements and the tuneful narratives, there was the deep, resonant hum of oral tradition. In every village, by every hearth, there were those who held the memories, the histories, and the moral compass of the community. These were the storytellers, the lore keepers. You settled down by a crackling fire, perhaps in an elder's home, or gathered around a flickering lamp in an inn. The storyteller, often a respected elder with a lifetime of experiences etched on their face, begins to speak. Their voice is perhaps softer, more intimate, yet commands profound attention. They share the legends of the land, the lineage of local families, the wise sayings of ancestors, or the cautionary tales that explained natural phenomena. They were the living archives, preserving the unwritten laws, customs, and shared identity of the people. In a world without readily available books or formal schooling for most, these storytellers ensured that knowledge and wisdom were passed down generation to generation. They were the collective memory, the historians and philosophers of the common folk, shaping understanding and reinforcing community bonds through the simple, powerful act of telling a tale. But sometimes news traveled not on purpose, but as a byproduct of commerce and movement. Consider the merchant, the peddler, or simply the traveler. You are in the market again, examining a bolt of fine linen from a distant city. The merchant, haggling over prices, pauses to share information. Times are hard up north, he might say, the winter was bitter and the roads impassable. Or, there's a new tax on wool in the next county over, so buy now while you can. These insights, shared casually across a counter, provided vital economic intelligence and a broader understanding of regional conditions. The peddler, with his pack full of trinkets, moved from isolated farmstead to hamlet, carrying not just goods, but also the latest gossip and news. He might share a recipe from another town, a rumor of banditry, or news of a birth or death. These individuals were the capillaries of the information network, connecting the smallest, most remote parts to the wider flow of life. Their winding paths were an essential conduit for news that otherwise would have never reached its destination. And where did all these threads of information converge? Often it was in the warm, convivial heart of the community, the inn or the tavern. You push open a heavy wooden door, stepping from the chill evening air into the boisterous warmth of the inn. The air is thick with the smell of ale and wood smoke. Voices rise and fall in a lively chorus. At the center of this vibrant hub, overseeing it all, is the innkeeper. The innkeeper was more than just a purveyor of food and drink. They were the unofficial postmaster general, the local gossip columnist, and often, the first point of contact for news from outside. Travelers, merchants, soldiers, and pilgrims all passed through their doors, each depositing their fragments of news and observations. The innkeeper, by listening and observing, synthesized this information. They knew who was coming and going, what was happening down the road, and what the general sentiment of the populace was. Their ear to the ground and their ability to discreetly share or withhold information made them incredibly powerful figures in the local communication network. They could confirm a rumor, spread a warning, or facilitate a clandestine meeting, all while serving another round of ale. These diverse individuals, with their strange and essential roles, formed the vital arteries of communication in a world utterly unlike our own. They were the living newspapers, the human internet, the radio and television of their time. Each voice, each story, each shared rumor, contributed to a collective understanding that kept communities connected, informed, and resilient. Without them, the vibrant tapestry of pre-industrial life would have been a collection of isolated threads, unable to share, unable to adapt, unable to truly thrive. They remind you of the fundamental human need to know, to connect, and to understand the world, even when the tools for doing so were nothing more than a human voice, a trusted ear, and the open space of the village square.